Good evening. In just over an hour, it will be daybreak in Perth, Western Australia. And the search for Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 will resume in the sea far off the Australian coast. You'll be aware satellites have spotted large pieces of debris, something floating in the Indian Ocean. 2 pieces of debris. Look at the sizes, approximately 5 meters for one of them. They're 14 miles apart. The authorities say they can't be sure it's got anything to do with the missing Boeing 777. But these 2 options, these 2 pieces of debris, are the best leads so far. Now, we could be looking at pieces of containers, but these pictures seem to be the best lead with the find the airliner and those that were on board. What does it all mean? Look and see, and I'll show you exactly how far this is going. We're talking about a vast difference and a vast distance. Joining me to make some perspective and to give me some idea, David Susi, one of our aviation experts. David,
hello, Richard.
Good to see you. Now,
good to see you.
Here we have a very powerful graphic interpretation of it. We start with KL. We've got the point of turn, right, the last known contact. We've got Perth, Australia over here. And we have...
This is where we have the pieces, right?
So talk me through the airliner scenario that makes this possible.
Okay, well, there's a couple of different scenarios, first of all, Richard. What we can do is, let's take 1 or 2, but I want to point out, when we do scenarios like this, it's not to say we think it's this, we think it's that. What we're trying to do is narrow down where this is going to be, where these parts are, and from that we can go backwards and see where we might have to have the impact.
But even this distance here from Perth to the debris, or the potential debris, that's the same as London to Moscow.
Yeah, 1,400 miles. 1,400 miles, Richard. So you're talking a long time. Now, when we talk, well, let's go back to the airplane first. Let's go back to this. So this airplane's coming up. Remember, it's night. It's dark. Dark. They can't see anything outside the aircraft. They're flying up here like this. Now, for some reason, when they transfer over, this is about where they were when they transferred over from one control area to the next control area, all right? So they're calling ahead. They're talking to the next controller, and they're talking to this controller saying, I'm going to be going this way. So they transfer over.
But they turn around here. What's likely to have happened that brings it all this way so far? Are we still looking at the so-called mechanical, or are we still looking at the nefarious means? And how would a plane make this sort of journey and end up there?
Well, it's got a lot of fuel in it, a lot of fuel in it. This airplane could go anywhere in this whole big circle that you see here. Right. So if it makes this turn from that point over, you have a couple of pings in here, you have some radar hits in here. So what is happening here? Now, one theory is that if there was a fire on board or all the equipment went off, then at that point, the aircraft could potentially have continued to fly. Remember, even without the autopilot, this airplane can fly because you're trimming it in. You're trimming in all the ailerons. You're trimming in the rudder. You're trimming in everything about that airplane so that you can literally take your hands and feet off the wheels and let it fly, even without the autopilot.
So we've got to be a little bit wary on all of this. We're not talking about a scenario here, or are we, where the plane can just literally fly until it runs out of fuel somewhere in the South Indian Ocean?
Certainly that's possible. There's nothing else to stop that aircraft at this point, especially if the autopilot is still kicked in, because like I said, if they had it well trimmed, which any good pilot would, and he is a good pilot. So we're coming across here, it's easy to think that that might have happened.
Okay, now, assuming something happened here.
Yes.
And these are just vast assumptions.
Right.
Something happens here, but we have the debris down here. Now, we know the satellite picture was I think it's 3 or 4 days old before we saw it.
Right.
So we're really not only working out where this debris is now, which could be another 3 days further on.
Yes.
But we've got to work out where it was 3 days ago and where the plane might have been, please God, 10 days before that.
Right. So here's kind of what we were looking at here. Remember, to get this area down here, the search area?
Yep.
That came from NTSB, FAA, everybody working together to say potentially how much fuel did it have, if it hit here, where would the currents take it, where would the winds take it, all of that. So that's how we figured this out in the first place. Now what we've got to do is kind of work it the other way around.
So the Royal Australian Air Force, the RAAF, they have been down there. They've been dropping basically detectors, buoys, or buoys,
sonar buoys
here, because they want to know which way the currents and the temperatures. Now, if that's the case, we really are, David, looking for something that's not here or there, but here.
Well,
and it could be...
I'm sorry, let me back up
Please.
on that a little bit, because remember we talked about if it drifted, it could be anywhere in here, but when we were searching for it. Now that you've pinpointed it, you turn the diamond around the other, or you turn the angles around the other way. So when you're coming back this way, this material here could potentially be anywhere from here to there, from here to there, from here to there, or from here to there.
This is... I'm going to be talking to Jenny Harrison in just a moment.
Yeah,
if we look at the objects, they may have been degraded, those objects, specifically so we don't know the intensity of whatever satellite capability it is. But the sizes involved, 24 meters, 5 meters. Well, with the Chinese version, everybody said it was too big. But I remember with Air France 447, the first piece they found was the rudder and the tail.
Right.
So is that likely?
Well, the rudder on the tail on that was not as big as this,
right,
but very close. So, yeah, it's definitely likely, and particularly because you're not talking about one big piece of metal that's sitting out there floating. It's very potential that these are small pieces that were broken up and held together. Remember, it's a composite aircraft. It has filaments that hold it together. So when it breaks, it doesn't just break off like a piece of glass. It's still going to hold itself together, if possible, with cables, with filaments, and with electrical systems.
It's always difficult to ask this last question, but there's never a good place to search for a plane crash.
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
But this seems to be amongst the very worst.
Look what's around here. There's nothing here. This is literally the most isolated place in the world, right here. There's no other place you could go and not be that distant, perhaps the polar caps. But that's it. 1,400 miles here. And look how far this is now. You're talking 4 hours out. Right. 4 hours. 4 hours. That plane has a potential to fly for 7 or 8 hours. So this is where we're going to focus.
David,
that's where they have to focus, right there.
David, thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Richard.
Making sense of what's been happening. Now, let's get an idea of the weather conditions in the ocean and the currents in the search area. Jenny, you've seen what we've been talking about here. You've seen the situation. I need your analysis now to help us understand what this means.
Yeah, well, as you said, Richard, it's all about the currents, tracing it back, and then obviously looking ahead as to where other bits of debris, if that's what we're looking for, may well have travelled to. The conditions in the actual search area have been not bad over the last few hours. This area of cloud here, this is a cold front that's been coming by, obviously bringing with it some stronger winds. That will help to move the waves as well. And at the same time, some rain as well, managing to stay south of Perth. And the reason I mention that, of course, is because, what is it, about an hour and 15 minutes now until sunrise. Here is the distance. You've just been showing it on your map. There again is just another view. The water temperature as well is something 12 to 15 degrees Celsius. But this view, this shows you the ocean depth, the base of the bottom of the ocean here, and these are actually tectonic plates. They're diverging plates in this region. They're pulling away from each other, the two main plates. And of course, it is what is going on below the ocean. How deep is it? Well, it could be as much as 3 kilometers deep, which is nearly 2 miles to get down there to the bottom of the ocean. Now, when it comes to weather conditions, this is obviously very crucial as well for Perth, from all those flights departing from there in just, what, an hour or two. We've got the winds coming out from the east, but the good thing is visibility. It is good. It is clear. The wind should have died down. It will stay fine and dry for the next couple of days. So good visibility as well. This is a model. We have just an exclusive model we've got here, a high-resolution model we're using on CNN, and this shows you in and around the search area the weather, of course, that is coming in. This is about 48 hours out, and in fact that system coming through is going to be taking place Saturday into Sunday. The winds obviously will pick up with that. The rain is fairly negligible in terms of what is accumulating. The currents, Richard, you mentioned the currents. Well, if you look at it on this big scale, first of all, let's just concentrate on this, because as we know, you have this main circulation around the search area. That search area a few days ago was further to the north, where the currents are actually much, much weaker. It is now, as we know, much further to the south. So getting close to this current here, this is known as the ACC. It's the Antarctic Circumpolar current, and that is the concern, of course, Richard. If it gets caught up in this, then that potentially could pull any debris much further over towards this east. And as you said, that is why they have dropped these buoys or buoys into the ocean to really begin to monitor and track what is happening with the ocean currents, so they can do all of this and extrapolate out the information to help them search.
Jenny Harrison, we thank you. You'll be back later in the programme for a usual weather forecast for Europe and an update. Thank you, Jenny, for that update. It is the usual 12 hours difference, just after 5 a.m. in Perth, Western Australia. Kyung La is there tonight. Good morning to Kyung. We know tell me the conditions. I think I can tell just by looking and listening. It looks grim.
Yeah, you can hear. It's quite grim here. The conditions as these planes are going to be taking off, it's not the best. You can see that there's rain, there's a lot of wind, and this has rolled in the last about 45 minutes or so, but they still do have about an hour before the first P-3 Orion takes off. What we have heard from the base here this morning is that they do have 2 planes planned to take off at 6 a.m. local time. That is in about an hour, and 8 a.m. local time. We've been talking about this for hours now, the conditions that they are going to be going through. But the people who are going to be boarding this, they've been here already for several hours in their briefing. They're going to board. Then they got to take a 4.5 to 5 hour flight over there. And we keep talking about how remote this area is. They only have 2 hours to circle, to look in this area before they have to return when they run out of sunlight. There is some good news because they do have that Norwegian ship, Richard, on the ground, and they've been working throughout the night. Richard.
Kyung La, who is in the rain. Kyung, we'll let you get on with some news gathering and finding out what's more about it. Kyung joins us now live from Perth, Western Australia. And remember what Kyung was just saying about the distances involved from Perth. Remember Perth out over here. The 4 hours flying time to the region where they will search. They only get 2 hours worth of search time before they have to go back again. And remember, these pictures here, or this bit of debris here, is 3 or 4 days old, the picture, so they've still got to work out where that might be 3 or 4 days further on. Now, we'll turn subjects.